Hi, my name is Andrew, and today I'm talking about combat. This video includes advice for both players and dungeon masters. How does combat start? The player's actions will usually determine if there's going to be combat, but it is the DM who ultimately decides and calls out, "Everyone roll initiative." This is the universal symbol that combat is starting. Everyone, including any monsters controlled by the DM, rolls a d20 and adds their initiative bonus, which in most cases is just their dexterity modifier. An assigned person, most usually the DM, then orders all participants in the combat by their initiative result, from best to worst. The combatant with the best result acts first, and so on down the list. There are a few personal rules that I use when doing this. The first is that monsters with the same stat block all go at the same time. This significantly speeds up play. The second is that ties between players and monsters always go to the players. I really like to challenge my players when I'm building my encounters, because I want that sense of them triumphing against impossible odds, so I give the players every reasonable advantage during the actual combat. The third is that whenever there's a tie between players, if I think those players are both on the ball, then I'll let them choose who goes first. If not, whoever has the better dexterity goes first, and if they have the same, then it's roll-off. A round goes by once everyone in the initiative order has acted. I expect that the average combat is about 3 to 5 rounds. A combat that only lasts 1 or 2 rounds is usually a smackdown for one side or the other. However, a combat that lasts 6 or more rounds is usually either an epic climactic battle or a slog, as the players slowly whittle away at a monster with a ton of HP. Advice for DMs. Smackdowns for the heroes can be fun on occasion, but we want to avoid them occurring constantly. And we also want to avoid unfun slogs, so I'd aim for 3 to 5 rounds. Before you roll initiative, however, there may be an opportunity for one side to surprise the other. If the DM thinks it is reasonable, based on how the party has proceeded up until then they can allow the players to make a stealth check and compare them to either the enemy's passive perception, if they are otherwise occupied, or an active perception check if they are on guard. Creatures whose perception result is worse than the entire opposing group's stealth are surprised. On the first turn of combat, they can neither act nor react. On your turn, you can move your speed, take an action, interact with an object, and take a possible bonus action. There are several basic actions that every character can take, such as dash, which doubles your movement speed, disengage, which means your movement does not provoke attacks of opportunity, dodge, which means attacks against you have disadvantage, and help, which gives an ally advantage on their next attack roll. Generally speaking, though, you will usually be either attacking or casting a spell. You also get one free object interaction. This is for minor things like opening a door or drawing a weapon. You also get a possible bonus action. This is a bit beyond the scope of this video, so I'll try to be brief, but I personally kind of hate bonus actions, the way they work mechanically. They were designed to solve an issue the designers were seeing with minor actions in 4th edition, in which, because they were intentionally designed, and every character had a few minor actions to choose from, players would spend their time thinking about how to best optimize their turn with their minor actions. The designers didn't like this, so they went ahead and removed the robust design, where minor actions were explicitly less than an action, and you could convert your action into one if you wanted to. And now we have bonus actions, in which some characters and some classes have multiple different ones to choose from every single turn, while other characters never use them at all. Classes like the Bard, who can use a bonus action to give bardic inspiration and healing word, often wish they could do both, but technically can't, because you can't convert your action into a bonus action. It's not only not in the core rules, but our Lord and Savior Jeremy Crawford says you can't. Now, a reasonable house rule that I use is that so long as it's not the same bonus action twice, you can convert an action into a bonus action. And there's also this confusing rule that a lot of people get wrong, including me, where we think the rule is that you can only cast one leveled spell per turn, but the actual rule is that if you use your bonus action to cast a spell, doesn't matter if it's cantrip, at Magic Stone, the only other spell that you can cast on your turn is a cantrip with a casting time of 1 action. Anyways, reactions. The most common type is the attack of opportunity. If an enemy is within your melee reach, usually 5 feet, and they move away from you without disengaging, then because they have made an opening in their defenses, you can use your reaction to make a free attack against them. Certain spells and abilities are also reactions, but keep in mind that you only get 1 per round, and they recharge at the start of your turn. Advice for DMs. If you have some new players, give them ample warning that their movement will provoke an attack of opportunity. But once they've been playing for a few years, don't warn them and just make the attack. At a certain point, they ought to know. This next part sort of assumes that you're playing on a grid, but even if you aren't, there are still some useful pieces of advice in here. Positioning is incredibly important. It determines who you can attack and who can attack you. Think twice before charging headlong into danger, because you may get surrounded. It's technically an optional rule in 5e, but flanking is a very easy way to introduce tactics into your game, where when you are on opposite sides of an enemy, both you and your ally get advantage on attack rolls against that enemy. Abilities and features like a Battle Master's pushing attack or a Warlock's repelling blast are also critical because, in an extreme example, you might be able to force an enemy off a cliff to certain doom. But if you can force an enemy to have to dash to be able to get within reach, you have essentially wasted that enemy's turn. Also, you can't be attacked if there's a wall between you and your enemy. So using cover to gain a bonus to your AC will significantly improve the odds that the enemy misses you. Half cover grants a +2 bonus to your armor class, while 3/4 cover grants a +5. And terrain can be just as important as the monsters that you choose to use. A simple open field might make for fights that are straightforward, but adding obstacles, elevation, or traps can make for a more dynamic and interesting encounter. Consider how the environment might favor one side or the other. Maybe the enemies are able to prepare in advance and set various traps that only they know about. I talked a bit about this in my 1 D&D video in the section on 5e, check it out here, but one of the core design features of 5th edition is flattened math, which creates a very important action economy. Because attack bonuses and ACs don't scale very much from level to level, even low-level bad guys can pose a danger to the PCs if you use enough of them. And that is the basic advice when it comes to action economy. The side with the most actions has a distinct advantage. If there's only one bad guy, that stat block needs to be able to do a lot of things if it's going to be able to pose a challenge for the party. Meanwhile, if there's a ton of bad guys, then it might be a instance where you're going to overwhelm the party. Here's a really good example of a time that I was a player when the DM did not keep in mind the action economy when they were designing the encounter. There's way too much background to go into detail with this example, but suffice it to say that we were a 6th level party and we were fighting a solo Oni. An Oni is a shape-changing, spell-casting ogre, and this one was especially evil. Now in this fight, I was playing Sir Arkazovar, the Dragonborn fighter, and I happened to have the Sentinel feat, which meant that whenever I took an attack of opportunity, remember those from earlier, I reduced the enemy's movement speed to 0, meaning that they just stayed in place. This combined with the Battlemaster's trip attacks, the Monk's stunning strikes, and the spellcasters in the party casting spells like Command meant that the Oni was basically never able to do anything of consequence in the entire battle. The only thing I think that DM changed from the stat block is that he doubled or tripled its hit points, which meant that it was just able to withstand the onslaught of 5, 6 level characters for a few more rounds. I will probably do a future video about making solo monsters that can challenge an entire party, but the simple advice is just to include several other monsters in the encounter to fill it out, to prevent the players from absolutely dogging on your bad guy. If it was me, I would have just thrown in about 6 ice methods to prevent the party from entirely focusing fire on the boss. It was a wintry encounter, so it would be very natural to describe how the snow-filled air around the Oni begins to whip around as large chunks of snow and ice form into 6 small, flying bat-like creatures. Now, why did I just say 6 ice methods? Did that number come from thin air? The answer is no. There is actually an encounter builder on D&D Beyond, which factors in elements like how big the party is or what level they are when determining difficulty. I'm actually really glad that this tool now exists because I was DMing for years before they added this official tool. I'll be sure to put a link below if you would like to use it. And if we check it out, we can actually see that an Oni by itself is an easy encounter for a 6th level party. But as soon as we add some ice methods, even though they're only CR 1/2, we increase the difficulty to hard. And the 6th ice method brings us to the bottom of deadly. Now the encounter tiers in this builder are not what we actually imagine they are, because the core rules assume 6 to 8 medium encounters per day. I talk about this a bit in my video on random encounters, check it out here. But this is just something that you're going to have to figure out when you actually try to figure out what a hard versus a deadly encounter is. When I think of a deadly encounter, I imagine that if the players make several tactical errors, roll poorly, and perform 0 intelligence gathering, that there's a decent chance that 1 or more characters may die. But I can basically guarantee that an Oni and 6 ice methods is not that. It's probably a challenge, but unless the characters are already exhausted, low in hit points and spell slots, I highly doubt that any characters are going to die. And if it turns out that only 6 ice methods was not enough, I can have 6 more appear halfway through the battle. The best advice that I can give as a DM for encounter building is to not feel afraid to change things on the fly if you think you made an error when you were building the encounter. Each encounter you make is an untested prototype and may need some revisions. It's perfectly alright to monkey with some of the monster's stats to reserve drama and tension. Just be careful when you do. A classic mid-battle adjustment is to describe how some enemies break and run, or to have reinforcements arrive. There are some players who might be perturbed at the idea that you adjusted the monster's HP mid-battle, so don't overshare that stuff with the players. Change whatever you think you need to change, so long as it's going to make the game more fun for your players. There are no winners in D&D. All of the heroes are working together to try and defeat the villains. It's perfectly acceptable and normal for the players to spend time talking amongst themselves about strategy and how they are going to accomplish their goals. Now, you may rightly object that if each round is only 6 seconds, how is it possible for the characters to coordinate in the middle of a battle? But as long as the discussion is not excessive, I don't think it's a huge deal. The characters are all experienced adventurers, and not only do they know what they are capable of, but they also know what their companions are capable of. As long as it's still a given PC's turn, I will usually allow them to rewind their turn if they made a mistake or acted on incorrect information. Once a couple of turns have passed by, however, it becomes increasingly impossible to just roll back some damage or add it retroactively. Now, the DM does not exist to kill the characters. The DM exists to create fun and interesting challenges for the characters. The DM controls the bad guys who want to kill the characters. This distinction is unfortunately lost on a lot of people, but I think it is of vital importance. Adversarial DMing, where the DM tries to trick the players to their characters' deaths, is not that fun in my opinion. Ultimately, we are at the table together to have fun, to hang out. So if a player has an interesting idea, and it seems reasonable, but it's not technically allowable, I will usually allow for there to be some chance of it occurring and try to make a fair ruling. Whether you are a seasoned adventurer or a fledgling dungeon master, I hope you feel better prepared for your next combat. Please feel free to share your own combat strategies in the comments below. All of that said, thank you guys for watching. Peace out.